Hello, babies. Welcome to the vortex of death. Though loving this podcast, by the vortex of death, what I mean is the end of all that we thought we were just even a moment ago, the end of all of our resistance to how it is now, the death of who we thought we were into this. That's what this podcast is about. It's what my album is about, Magnificat, and it's from the song that we're going to be diving into today from the album called Burdens.
Lay your burden down. Lay your burden down.
So this song, at least the chorus of this song, was written at the Mystic Hymnal Songwriters Retreat, the first one that we did, which was last year. And we do have the second one coming up very soon, by the way. And there's still at least one room available, I heard this morning. So please do hit us up if you're interested in that. But this event was such a beautiful and magical experience for so many of us. And some really amazing music got written. A couple of the songs actually did end up on this album, including this chorus. The full song was written by Hannah Myers and Jessica Young, and I'd love to share with you some of the audio of the original version that Jessica and Hannah shared with us at the retreat.
Lay your burden down. Lay your burden down. Lay your burden down. Lay your burden down.
There was just something really kind of like innocent. It reminded me of almost like an experience I would have had with worship back in like the 90s or something as a kid. Just the call and response. And to me, it was a kind message of like, let's just lay our burdens down. And then that retreat for me and for so many of us that were there, it was just such a magical experience. And I wanted to be able to find a way to get some of that feeling on the album. So at first I played with some different ideas of how to turn that kind of into a full song for the album. And here's one of the early renditions of it.
Keep trying to hold the world up, bring some peace and love. Your arms are getting heavy. It's far too much to carry. What if you could let it all go? Like a cloud in the sky, like a raindrop in a garden. I can hold your heart in mine. There is all the room in the world for every cloud in the sky. So like a raindrop in a garden, you can rest and lay your burden.
As you can hear, if you're familiar with the current version of the song, a lot of the melody and stuff stayed the same in the verse from the initial version to where it ended up. But there's something about the lyric, I really liked the images, I liked the ideas, but I didn't want it to feel preachy. So for a few months, I was having a hard time finding like where this song could fit into this album. There's something that felt right about it, but was having a hard time finding the sweet spot. And then Los Angeles got set on fire.
Wind gusts as high as 99 miles per hour fueled new destructive wildfires in the Los Angeles area overnight. You can see how,
as you might imagine, things felt really intense in LA. And to make matters worse, that morning I came down with Bell's palsy, which is a condition where half of your face gets paralyzed, just goes numb and still. So that morning I had gone to urgent care, and I remember just watching the smoke like begin to billow into the sky and like, whoa, what is going on right now?
Homes and businesses burned to the ground as tens of thousands of people scrambled to evacuate.
So I'm in the doctor's office, and the smoke is billowing outside, and the fires are beginning to build, and he doesn't really know what's going on with my face. Like, apparently the medical establishment doesn't know that much about Bell's palsy. He was actually like reading from his phone. And I was like, I think I read those. It looked like he was reading from the same websites that I was reading from, which was a little disconcerting. But I just wasn't feeling great about being in LA because apparently like toxins and environmental factors can be a part of Bell's palsy. And I already had a rough go with my lungs with smoke in LA before. And I'm like, let's get out of here. And there was a couple aspects of this fleeing from LA that I feel like played important parts of this song and this album. The first is the forest. One of the places I ended up in fleeing the city was out in the Sequoia forest outside of Yosemite with some friends. And we just went around and were playing in the forest and like making sounds. And I was recording it with my phone because I thought the sounds were really cool. And I wondered if they could possibly find a place in the album. And as I've talked about in a couple of the other episodes in this series already, these trees became sort of a character in the album. They also gave me a lot of sounds that I used in different songs. But there was also another aspect of the forest life that I went into that made its way to the record. And that's, well, madness. After I was in the Sequoia forest, I went up to Nevada City and rented this little Airbnb out in the forest by myself and just kind of went like hermit zone. And I got kind of weird. I was on so many like supplements and medication for the Bell's palsy. I was on like steroids. And so I was hardly sleeping. I couldn't really sleep. And just being out in the forest by myself, I kind of went into this weird like flow fugue state with the forest, nobody around, doing nothing but recording, hardly sleeping. And the album got weirder. She was somebody I looked up to, and she said it so casually. My theology and my bedroom, no church would ever have me. So I put my nicest suit on, I collected my tears, found a peer space near a strip club. I invited all my friends. I don't think that God needs beliefs, but she might like a clown. So if you'd like to take some time to drop the mind.
Lay your burden.
Okay, so we'll jump into what's going on here musically and lyrically in just a second. But let me go to the second thing that I feel like fleeing from Los Angeles offered to this album, which was the Bell's palsy. There was something about part of my body, and particularly my face, like leaving my body in a way, because that's what it's like. It's like suddenly I had no access to half my face. That experience of having like your face exiled from your body was very emotional. I would just sit and touch every tiny spot on my face for hours. Like just feeling, I could feel where it was numb, and I would touch like the equal sides of both of my face. Like I could feel it on the right side, but not the left. And I would just barely touch it and just kind of like try to send love into my face. And I had some really beautiful moments when a nerve would like come back online a little bit. Like you could feel this tiny little spark of life again. And it was like part of my body that had left had returned. And every time that happened, it was like really beautiful and emotional. And I would weep, like, welcome back. And it really reminded me of a lot of Yeshua's teachings about like the prodigal son, the father welcoming back this son that had left, or the story of the shepherd who left the 99 sheep to find the one, or the parable of the lost coin, or the yeast moving through the dough. There's like this aspect of homecoming, of being born again, that is love, that is the heart of God, or the nature of things, the way that it is, the Tao. And if you've been tuning into this podcast series so far, you will have heard this theme a lot. The whole welcoming in of that which we think is lost, that which we think doesn't belong, welcoming that into presence, into awareness, into love. And what was such a beautiful aspect of this experience with Bell's palsy that I was having was that it wasn't just an idea. It wasn't just an abstract concept that I was writing about in this album, but I was feeling it in my body. I was feeling even my body welcoming my body back slowly, nerve by nerve, millimeter by millimeter. But every one of them was so precious. So that's kind of the feeling I wanted to have in everything I was making on this album. And so for this song, Burdens, again, I didn't want the verses to feel trite or preachy. I wanted it to come from as authentic of a place of welcome as possible. And so I looked for any pain that I could find in my own story. And what came up for me was some stuff that had happened in my life around community, and more specifically, religious community, church community. As some of you may know, I grew up in the church. My dad was a pastor. I grew up as a Christian worship leader and became pretty famous in some of the Christian circles. But in some of those circles, that famous turned to infamous as my beliefs began to be questioned publicly, as I went through years of searching and evolving. And some of the ways that I did that, let's just in short say a lot of people did not like it. And as you can imagine, that wasn't always easy. Some of that journey was really painful. And one particular pain point that had happened fairly recently when I was thinking about this was a conversation that I had had with somebody who I really respected when I was younger, somebody that's in the Christian world, a pretty prominent person in the worship world. And I was having a conversation with her. It was actually about somebody else, but I was kind of encouraging her to try to have more grace in a situation. And her example of why she was coming at it like that, she's like, well, it's like you, no church would ever have you. So, what do you do with that? One option would surely be cynicism, jadedness, and anger at the church. And there were years that I really had to watch out for that. And for a long time, I just had to not even step foot in churches. But what would happen if I didn't become a victim of her statement, if I didn't let it shut me off from people even more, but instead used that pain as an opportunity to surrender and dig deeper into what I want, which is community? No church would ever have me. So I put my nicest suit on. I collected my tears. Found a peer space near a strip club. I invited all my friends. I don't think that God needs beliefs, but she might like a clown. So if you'd like to take some time to drop the mind,
lay your burden.
And so this second half of the verse is what my response has been to feeling unwelcome in the mainstream church. And that's to just find my people and just let's do it ourselves. The specific event that I'm sort of referring to in this second half of the verse was an event called Play. I started it in LA last year and did a few events, and it was so fun. It was so magical. It was like the kind of church that I would dream of going to. We found this little spot that this church had rented, LA Church, downtown LA. It was a real seedy area right next to this strip club, but it was super fun. We had this little fire pit outside that people could come and talk and get drinks around, and then you'd come in and people would be painting or dancing. There was a DJ, and then we had music that we would sing with. We had meditation that ended with a sound bath. There was all this stuff going on. I dressed up for it. I dressed like I was going to be a pastor. at like a 90s church. I actually sort of tried to make myself look as much like my dad did as a 90s pastor as possible. I put a nice suit on. I shaved a mustache. We started the whole thing with like this whole ceremony that was supposed to feel really serious, but it was a bubble blowing ceremony where people came up in like these monk robes and we had this very somber religious music, and we're holding up this like incredibly ornate, bedazzled bubble holder, bubble bottle, and then we blew the bubbles and launched into a dance party. It was so much fun. It was ridiculous, sacred, and beautiful, and everybody was welcome just as they are. And I don't think it would have happened if me and a lot of others of us hadn't been rejected. We wouldn't have been so intentional about making the space comfortable and safe for people who don't normally fit the norms. We wouldn't have been so insistent not to build it on dogma, not to build it on us versus them, because we know what it's like to be drawn on the outside of those lines. And so this burden that I had experienced and so many of us had experienced had been offered, surrendered, and transmuted into this beautiful, playful community. One other thing here about the lyric. This is the first time that I mention clown directly. I don't think that God needs beliefs, but she might like a clown. I'm going to put that one as one of my favorite lyrics on the whole album. There's something, I got into this sacred clowning thing this last year, and that probably sounds insane. I'm not talking just kind of probably what you might think of as clowns, just, people with painted faces doing parties and performing at circuses and stuff. There's actually kind of this spiritual, unattached, Zen, Taoist, archetypal, mystical approach to clowning that I find incredibly fascinating. It's this sort of like mediator between the normal world and God. The clown can serve as this sort of mystical bridge out of the norms, out of the ways that we mask ourselves. And the clown can show up in very authentic, even if unacceptable ways. And there's this thing called Clown Church in LA that if you are ever in LA and you get a chance to check it out, highly, highly recommend Clown Church. But the basic idea is we're unmasked, we're present, we're fully embodied and unafraid. And so this is a nod to that. And it's also the recognition that this character at this point in the arc of the album is fully embracing the beauty and the absurdity of being God, but also being this clown, jester, mystic, and all of the limitations of that. I actually was toying with naming the whole album Clown Heart for a little while. Didn't end up going that way, but the clown really was an important part of this whole album for me. Okay, let's talk music for a second. The fact that this song is pretty much just 4 chords over and over gave me some permission to really kind of play around with the voicings and the timing and the tones that if there was more happening might be sort of distracting. Like, for instance, this bass part in the verse would probably be way too busy if there was much else happening, but because it's just sort of by itself with the drums and the Juno keyboard, it works for me. So here's the bass. And I'm playing way behind the beat. What that means for those of you who are not musicians is you have the click here was representing where the beat is. So if a part was like right on the beat, it would be going dun 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 dun. But it's kind of like a little to the right on the grid. So and for me, this kind of creates a feeling of just kind of like, it's almost like a groan or like, And then to add to that feeling, the hi-hat part is actually playing 7/8. So what that means is like normally you'd have 8/8 notes in a measure, and this only does 7. It's dragging so far behind that it just kind of skips one of the 8 notes. Also, you might recognize some of the sounds here from La Rate, from the first track. These sounds are from the forest. A lot of the kind of all that stuff are affected sounds from banging on trees in the forest. Oh, another one of the sounds I really like in this one is the guitars that come in at one point. It was actually from the Mystic Hymnal recording. I asked anybody that had a guitar there to pick it up and stand around the mics. And we got all the guitars going at once. There's like a ton of guitars in this pass. Some of the sounds I also like on this song were vocal sounds that I just sort of really affected. So remember, this is me like out in the forest by myself singing these weird timbres and then trying to like make instruments out of it. Then some little finger picky electric guitars. I kind of like the production of this because I wasn't really thinking in terms of necessary rhythm section components. Like when it gets to the big chorus, there aren't even really drums happening there. The drums kind of happen in the verse. It's a little bit unusual, I suppose. But it all just kind of like worked together somehow. At least for my taste, I guess. Okay, so let's go to the second verse, and I'll talk about it first before I play it for you, because it's actually a little hard to understand probably the words in this, because it gets so affected and there's a lot of stuff happening. But the lyric says, "Met Grandpa in the forest. I asked what he could teach me. My fingers in the black bark, and this is what he told me." I like this lyric because this is something I feel like I do fairly often with my songs. When I can find a lyric that sounds like it's really, metaphorical or poetic or somewhere out there, like, wow, what does that mean? Sometimes when it's just like the most literal thing in the world of what I'm trying to describe. And that's kind of this passage. I met this tree in the forest while I was out. It was this giant sequoia tree. And it just seemed like a big grandpa to me. It seemed like a grandfather tree. So met Grandpa in the forest. I asked what he could teach me. It's not a metaphor. It's just, that's what happened. I asked, do you have something to teach me? And put my fingers in the bark, which was black. There was like all these burn marks on the bark of this big tree. And I just kind of felt like there was something there. It kind of felt like it was drawing me in. So I actually pushed record on my phone, and this is what he told me. I actually just left the recording in time in the record. I didn't want to like speed up and get to what he told me. So I just kind of like let the file play and make the music around it. But in the voice memo, this is kind of what I went quiet and was listening and spoke what I heard as I heard it. But you have to teach me. There are no scars. Scars imply how something should be. There are no scars. Scars imply how something should be. And here's what that meant to me. When I was looking at the tree, I saw the burn marks, and it looked like, oh, this tree. I mean, that may even have been why I felt drawn to it. Like, oh, look at what this tree's been through. And so I put my fingers in the black bark and the burn marks. And the realization was, there are no scars. I thought that scars existed on the tree, but what I saw was that the scars existed in my mind. To the tree, it didn't have any scars. It just was what it is. You see, in my mind, there's a normal version of a tree, and it doesn't have burn marks. But that's an abstract thought. That's just an idea of a tree. But this grandfather tree wasn't my idea of a tree. He was just that tree. It's only a human mind and imagination that would imagine what a tree would look like without that scar. To the tree who's been through a fire, that's just a tree that's been through a fire. It's also been through a lot of sunlight and a lot of rain. And all of that is not separate from it. That's just how that tree is. And how many of us, when we look at our lives, we apply some sort of ideal of what we should be what normal is, how we should feel, what our life should look like. What if we're not victims of life, but life itself? And if what we call scars or what we call victories, accomplishments, achievements, shame, anger, fear, joy, bliss, what if it's all just lifing? Well, from that perspective, laying our burdens down is not so much, please change this universe or life or God. It's not, please get rid of this burden. It's letting everything be as alive as it is. It's stepping out of the seat of the judge and into the body of the jester, into the enjoyment of the clown who plays with and as creation. And that letting it be is how the burdens become praise. If you remember the song before this one that we looked at, which was Smokeless Fire, this is what it's talking about. I know what I'd like to make. A small fragile heart that breaks. It feels all the suffering, makes it an offering. Burdens becoming praise. Burdens becoming praise. What if we can see the burdens that we carry as potential? What seems like chaos can actually be part of the dissonance of this chord that then resolves into this chord, and it can be this grand symphony. And that's the invitation of this song. And the willingness to experience the fullness of life like this makes it all lighter, makes it more like a romance or an adventure or a game. And there's an insight here to see that the suffering can actually become a grace when it is seen through this lens, when the suffering and the burdens can actually become a road back to presence here and now. It's almost like the gift of a pain when you put your hand too close to a fire. The pain of your hand saying, no, that's too hot, is actually like a gift to your body. If you didn't have those pain receptors, you might just put your whole hand in and just burn it completely off. But the pain that says, come back, that can be how we experience burdens, where we go, oh, this is getting too much. I'm trying to hold too much life in my mind and in my hands. I'm going to offer it back as praise to whatever the source of life is. And then that burden becomes a bridge back to God. So I'm going to go ahead and just play the whole song for you now. But just let me say thanks one more time for being here. I also want to say thank you specifically to the patrons and everybody that helps make this work possible. I am so glad that you're here. I'm so glad to be able to make music and be able to share it. And I've really been enjoying making this series. And I hope you've been enjoying listening to it. So thank you. And I love you. And we'll see you next week.
Lay your burden down. Lay your burden down.
She was somebody I looked up to, and she said it so casually. My theology and my bedroom, no church would ever have me. So I put my nicest suit on, I collected my tears, found a peer space near a strip club. I invited all my friends. I don't think that God needs beliefs, but she might like a clown. So if you'd like to take some time to drop the mind.